The National Restaurant Association has decided to game the system so their own restaurant workers are funding their lobbying efforts against the very workers who are funding those efforts. What do I mean by that? Well, apparently they lobbied pretty hard to make mandatory a certification having to do with food handling, a food handling course known as Safe Serve. Now, Safe Serve, turns out, is something that ended up being owned by these restaurant owners, right? These incredibly powerful restaurant restaurant groups. And so what they did is they bought Safe Serve, then they lobbied state and local governments to make mandatory that the workers take this certification, and by the way, pay for the certification and the course. And then they took that money and used it to lobby against their workers to keep their wages low. It is, I mean, I wouldn't say it's unbelievable. It is very believable. This is how the system really works. So the New York Times reported on this and they wrote, for many cooks, waiters, and bartenders, it is an annoying entrance fee to the food service business. Before starting a new job, they pay around $15 to a company called ServeSafe for an online class in food safety. Now, while the course teaches basic etiquettes that I think most people already know and don't necessarily need to pay for a course for, things like washing your hand, what does mold look like, that kind of stuff. Again, it is a compulsory course. Here's where it gets tricky. So the funds from the compulsory course actually helps the restaurant lobby against the workers. The company they are paying, ServeSafe, doubles as a fundraising arm of the National Restaurant Association, the largest lobbying group for the food service industry, meaning the actual employers, not the workers in the food service industry, claiming to represent more than 500,000 restaurant businesses. But in reality, for years, the Restaurant Association and its affiliates have used ServeSafe to create an arrangement with few parallels in Washington, where labor unwittingly helps to pay for the management's lobbying. The association has spent decades fighting increases, as you all know, to the minimum wage at the federal and state levels, as well as the sub-minimum wage paid to tipped workers like waiters. And the sub-minimum wage is basically a lower than minimum wage amount that restaurant workers, people like servers make, because the whole idea is the tips that the consumers pay will make up the difference between the sub-minimum wage and the actual minimum wage that everyone else gets paid.
Yeah, so guys, I mean, it doesn't get any worse than this, but there's so many twists that make the story even worse, right? So the restaurants first started doing the scam where they were charging their workers on how to train them to work for them.
It's insane.
No, you're supposed to pay them for that. So instead of paying them $15, they were charging them $15. By the way, they have to do it every 3 years. So this scam just keeps on rolling, okay? So they were making money off of that, and get a load of this. The first thing they did in lobbying was not to cut their wages, but was to lobby states to get them to mandate this training. Now, like normally, companies are against regulation, right? But in this case, since they're making money off of it, they lobbied the states, mandate regulation for us because we're the ones that are getting paid for the regulation from our own workers, right? So then when it becomes a mandate, they're like, well, there's nothing we could do. Yeah. You have to go and take this course and you have to pay me for it, right? And remember, it's not 15, it's 30 because they should, like when we hire people here and then we got to train Bart, for example, a long time ago on the audio board, right? If we were like, all right, now we're training you, Bart, give us money.
Insane.
No, that's insane, okay? So, but that's what they do on a regular basis, and then they have the government mandate it, okay? Then they collect all that money, and then they use it for lobbying to make sure your wages are as low as humanly possible. In fact, for that industry, the minimum wage is $2.13 an hour.
And by the way, this little scam that they're running is very profitable for them, and it has served as a cash cow for their lobbying efforts. So let's give you some specific numbers here. More than 3.6 million workers have taken this training, providing about $25 million in revenue to the restaurant industry's lobbying arm since 2010. That was more than the National Restaurant Association spent on lobbying in the same period. Okay, so they are profiting from this, obviously, to some extent, but they are mostly using this money, again, to lobby against the very workers who are funding the lobbying effort itself. The federal minimum wage has risen just once since 1996 to $7.25 from $5.15. While the minimum hourly wage for tipped workers has been $2.13 since 1991. Now I wanna just add one caveat to that because there are some states, I've been pretty negative toward California for I think legitimate reasons. However, the one thing that I will say about California and some of the laws that have been passed here is that the actual minimum wage in the state that is applied to minimum wage workers is applied to all minimum wage workers, including wait staff, including restaurant workers.
Yeah.
So they're not making the sub minimum wage. They're making whatever the state's minimum wage is, and they're making tips on top of that.
Yeah, and so credit and discredit to California, but states like California raised the $15 minimum wage while Barack Obama, Joe Biden, all the Democratic presidents did nothing to raise the minimum wage. Last time that it was raised was under George W. Bush, okay? And then Democratic presidents got in and were like, who cares about the workers? We were lying all along. Never did a goddamn thing about it. Now, you know with the $2.13, they get tips on top of that, right? And that's why it's that low. But you're supposed to keep increasing that to keep up with inflation. They haven't, as you saw there, haven't raised it since 91. Again, Obama, Biden, all the Democrats, Clinton, nothing. They don't care. Republicans, just don't get me wrong. We're not the stupid fake left. The Republicans are the worst of the worst. They would never raise the workers' wages if their lives depended on it. And ironically, they've convinced the average worker that they're somehow the populace. No, Republicans are dirtbags who work for the rich and have done so their entire lives. Yep. We get more disappointed from the Democrats because they're supposed to represent the workers and they don't. So this scam's been going on forever. And by the way, did anybody ever tell you about this scam until now? No, because unfortunately the great majority of the media is in on it. But credit to this story. It's a great story.
New York Times published it, so they do deserve credit for drawing attention.
They definitely do, and I take on the New York Times all the time. But I wouldn't if they did great work, and this is great work. I was shocked to see it in the New York Times.
Yes, and just one thing to clarify, because it's kind of easy for this point to get lost in the back and forth that we're having. So the minimum wage was raised one time since 1996.
Yeah, that was under Bush.
It was under Bush? I thought it was.
They passed it under Bush and then it got applied under Obama.
It was applied in 2009, which is why I got it.
But Obama did not pass it. He did not raise it. And remember, he had a supermajority. Didn't do anything on it.
Incredible. Really incredible stuff. All right.
You know what? I'm going to say one last thing about it. Just because it's about the minimum wage and the National Restaurant Association. Remember, they voted on the minimum wage under Biden, right? And Biden said that he was in favor of it. And who killed it? Well, all the Republicans voted no, but Manchin Sinema, and you remember Sinema did the twirling no vote, that was on the minimum wage, okay? And so what did Sinema and Manchin do right afterwards? They went to the same lobbying group, National Restaurant Association, and collected checks, and they bragged on camera about it. They're like, I got paid to screw over the workers. And to give you a sense of how much generally mainstream media sucks and just works for these lying Democrats and lying corporate politicians overall. You know that 8 Democratic, it wasn't just Manchin Sinema, 8 Democratic senators voted against it, including Biden's top allies. Did you know that Biden during the Super Bowl interview already said the minimum wage wasn't gonna happen? Then he told a couple of weeks later in February, mayors and governors that came to the White House, it's definitely not gonna happen. That was months before the vote. And that was, remember, January 6, 2021. And then of course his inauguration was January 20th. The Super Bowl was just a couple of weeks later. Biden knew he was never gonna raise the minimum wage. He had been lying about it the entire time. Did anybody in mainstream media, did MSNBC, CNN, and New York Times in a different context, whenever, this is a great story, but when it comes to Biden, Biden. Did they tell you that son of a bitch was lying the whole time? Never. Learn the reality. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.